This has got to be my favorite way to have roast pork. G'day friends, how's it going? Welcome back to Sam's Home Kitchen, where I bring to you budget-friendly recipes with sustainability in mind. This week we are making pork roast. It's Sunday, it's raining, it's a little bit cold, so Sunday roast sesh kind of just makes a lot of sense. It's a slow cooking process that the meat we yield at the end is really moist, really tender. On top, that beautiful pork crackling that is crunchy, stimulates all of the sensations. That is enough said, and let's get cooking. Righty, got our pork, $6.99 a kilo. Very often these roasts come in these nets. Sometimes it's handy, but I never really roast with them, so I always just unpack them and deal with the meat on its own. So with the meat over here, we almost want to cut it in a way that we have a slab with skin on top and then an even layer of meat on the bottom. We're going to have to trim this part off and then make this a little bit more even. Butchering our own meat can be a little daunting at first. The key is to use our both hands. One to peel the muscle away, and the other one using a sharp knife and just patiently picking it apart. These supermarket roasts are literally butchered with very little care. Mass production reflects on the meat cut, but also on the price, so I'm not complaining here. You get what you pay for, and I'm okay with doing some extra work for a far lower price. Some tidying up is necessary. Follow the muscle tissue and trim these pieces off. These offcuts are incredibly flavorful, so make sure you subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss out the video on how to use these up. I'm thinking wonton, hint hint. So far we've trimmed off some of the end bits and some of the offcuts. The end goal really is to, when we want to roast it, we want to have a piece of meat that is as even, as flat as possible. So when it's receiving heat from the heating element, it will all be cooked evenly and then we'll get an even and beautiful crackles. You can see that our pork shoulder right now is a bit thicker in the middle. Get our knife in and trim some more off so it can lay flat in the oven. We've encountered some silver skin here. Silver skin usually is on the chewier side, so I recommend taking it off if you have the time. These offcuts will make great stir fries, mince, etc, etc. And the fat can be cooked down and used as tallow. No waste whatsoever. So with this packed up, the beauty of this is pop it in the freezer. We can actually just break them and then take parts that we want out of the freezer without frosting the meat too much. Into the freezer they go. So back to our piece of meat. We've done our best to trim off. It's not perfect because this is animal, like it's not meant to be perfect. So I just need to see what we can do to make it as level as possible. But before we do that, we're going to poke holes on the skin to make sure that the fat renders down to enable our skin to be really crispy and beautiful. Poking holes will allow heat to penetrate through the fat layer a lot easier in the oven to render it down. So now the butchering part of the meat is done. One very key step to ensure that we get a beautiful golden crispy pork skin is to have it cure or have it dry out in the fridge overnight. We're going to do two things at once. We're going to have the meat briny, but also expose the skin at the surface. So when we pop it in the fridge, it's going to soak the flavor into our meat and make it nice and moist, and at the same time, dry out the skin. Add just enough water to submerge our pork shoulder, but leaving the skin exposed. Take the meat out and add in 3% of salt in water weight to make a brine. And obviously with this step, you can add in your seasoning, your spices, your bay leaves, if you want to infuse more flavor to the pork. More salt on the skin to help us draw the moisture out. Next step, we'll pop it in the fridge and let it sit overnight. I recommend leaving the pork in the fridge exposed for at least 8 hours or overnight for the best crackling. So it's the next day. No, it's not the next day. This is a piece of meat that I prepared the day before, and we can see that the skin is nice and dry. So with the piece of meat here, we can see There's thicker part and thinner part. Grab a piece of aluminium foil and crunch it up. We want to prop up the thinner side of the meat to level it. Next, tear up another piece of alfoil, about twice the size of the pork. Place our pork right in the center. We then want to fold up the 4 edges to help keep the moisture in the pork by creating little shells around the meat. Once this is all done, pop it in the oven preheated at 160 degrees Celsius at fan force. Roast for 2 to 2.5 hours depending on the size of the meat. For a more even cookness, I recommend turning the roast around about halfway through. Once internal temperature reaches 62 degrees Celsius, crank the heat up to 250 and roast for another 30 minutes or until the skin is all puffed up and blistering. Time's up, take the pork out and rest for at least 20 minutes. Pork is all done here. While I was waiting, I got bored and I thought, why not make some homemade baguette? I'm going to put it all together and make a little Vietnamese sandwich or banh mi. Cut the baguette in half the long way. Thinly slice up some cucumber, julienne carrot. Given this is so impromptu, I don't have any chicken liver pate, but pork fat here can provide some alternative richness. Cucumber in, julienne carrot. Listen to the crackling. The meat is so tender. Pork on. And top it with a generous amount of crackling that we worked so hard for. Adding some hot sauce on my half of the sandwich. Some coriander for good measures. Just look at this beauty. The only cost I can share this time round is that these roast cuts are such a great way to save money. $7 a kilo, boneless, can go a very long way. Alright, and there we have it. That is our roast pork all done right here. It's golden, crispy, smelling so good. I'm going to dive into my banh mi and let you know. The crackling, man, it's not just crunchy in your mouth, but coming in through your ears. That's just another layer of sensation. It's rich, it's flavorful, but all of the fat has rendered down really nicely. Doesn't make it super greasy or oily. The richness of the pork combined with your carrots and cucumber for that freshness, a little bit of chili kick and a little bit of sriracha never hurts nobody. This right here, instead of using pork belly, usually goes in between 15 to 20 something dollars. $7 a kilo for the pork shoulder gives you just as much sensation, give you as much flavor. And with the offcuts, there's so much we can do with them, from stir fry to, your meat strips, or making dumplings or wonton. And you can be assured that I have a recipe or two coming out on how to use up those offcuts that's sitting in my freezer right now. Alright, that is all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you learned something, give it a like. If you want to see more of these content, consider subscribing. I have one of these budget cooking video coming out every 2 weeks. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.